We know that if our human species is going to survive for as long in the future as it has in the past, then we're going to have to change our behaviour. The big questions are, what should we change and how should we do it? To understand how to do it, we need to know what behaviour is and to understand how it works. And that's what we're going to begin to do in this episode, when we look at individual behaviour. Humans share a common ancestor with the great apes, and we are the most complex species on Earth. We are the complex ape. Before we try to answer the question of how to change behaviour, perhaps we should give some thought to what behaviour we should be trying to change and when it would be most appropriate to change it. We do what we do for one of two reasons. We were either born able to do it, it was innate, or we learned how to do it later in life. And when we do what we do, we either do it unconsciously, it's automatic, or we do it consciously and it's voluntary. All innate behaviour is automatic. It includes things like the reflexes and the instincts. Learned behaviour starts off as voluntary and then becomes automatic as skills or habits. Some behaviour remains voluntary forever, such as concentrating on things which are difficult or intricate. Mental activities like reasoning, working things out, or planning for the future. These boundaries are not fixed. For example, breathing is an innate behaviour, but we can turn it into a learned behaviour. We can stop breathing for a while if we choose to do so. Talking is a mixture of innate behaviour and learned behaviour. Making sounds is innate. Putting those sounds together in a structured way is learned. Driving, one of those behaviours which begins as voluntary and becomes learned, we can drive in automatic mode. Occasionally, we're not in automatic mode. We go back to voluntary mode when we have to think about what we're doing when we're driving. Innate behaviour is the result of biological evolution, so we aren't going to change it in a hurry unless we adopt practices such as eugenics or genetic engineering. So we need to concentrate our efforts on learned behaviour. Ideally, we should intervene in learned behaviour before it becomes automatic, because when it's got automatic, it becomes very, very difficult to change. When it comes to the question of changing behaviour, first thing we should ask is, can we actually change actions directly? Can we make people do what we want them to do? And can we stop them doing what we don't want them to do? Well, the answer to that is yes. And this way of changing behaviour is called coercion. It's the exercise of power, authority and force to make them do what we want them to do. This form of control is external or extrinsic, and it works, but it's not particularly efficient. The force has to be maintained in order to keep the behaviour from changing back. And it can be a particularly unpleasant experience for everybody involved. If we think about action as a part of something rather than in isolation, we may find other ways of changing behaviour. People act for a reason. They have a purpose. They're trying to achieve something. Acting with intention is an ability which we call agency. Agency has two parts, action and intention. And generally, the intention for most of us is to achieve a goal or to satisfy a need. That's our desired state. That's where we would like to be. But we also have an actual state where we are. And quite often that means all our goals are not achieved and all our needs are not satisfied. What that does creates a difference between our desired state and our actual state. The arrows show the cause-effect link, so the desired state and the actual state cause a difference between them. The letters, the S and the O, simply indicate whether the two ends of the arrow move in the same direction or opposite directions. So in this case, when the desired state is increased, the difference is increased. When the actual state is increased, it moves closer to the desired state and the difference is reduced. It's the difference that causes us to be motivated to act, and motivation causes the effect of action. And in turn, action causes a change in the actual state, which moves it towards the desired state. And the closer it gets, the closer we are to having our goals achieved and our needs satisfied. What we've just modelled is a typical control system. And as a system, it has feedback loop. And the feedback loop is a balancing loop. It serves to balance desired state and actual state, and when they come into balance, there's no longer any difference, no motivation and no action. Making changes in a control system is known as regulation, and this is our second method of changing behaviour. We can change desired state, for example by advertising, making people want something that they didn't want before. We can change motivation by providing incentives. We can change the actual state by doing something for them so that they don't need to do it for themselves. Regulation is also an extrinsic method of control. It is done from the outside in. As well as having agency, the ability to act with intention, individuals can adapt their behaviour to suit the circumstances and to improve the outcome. Adaption helps to move from the actual state to the desired state more efficiently. To add the ability to adapt to our behavioural system, we begin with our control system and we add an adaption subsystem. That subsystem works on the basis that we can experience the actual state that we're in, and we know whether it's changing or not, and we know whether it's changing in the right direction. Using that experience, we can adapt the actions that we take. We can either carry on doing the same thing with more effort, or we can modify what we're doing, or we can change what we're doing altogether. This subsystem is a reinforcing subsystem. It has a feedback loop. What that feedback loop does is it continuously improves the action that we take so that we can more efficiently, more quickly move the actual state in the direction of the desired state. Of course, when those actual state and desired states are the same, action ceases and there's no further need to adapt. The adaption subsystem gives us another opportunity to intervene in behaviour, and that's by changing the experience that the person has. Psychologists call this conditioning, which sounds complicated, but it's actually quite straightforward, and we all do it all the time. If somebody behaves in a way you like, you reward it. If they behave in a way you don't like, you punish it. The response from the person is to change their behaviour accordingly. Everybody likes to be rewarded and nobody likes to be punished. If you repeat that process often enough, the behaviour will become automatic. I call this method of changing behaviour manipulation, and it's another example of extrinsic action. There's a third characteristic which we can add to individuals in addition to agency and adaption, and that characteristic is autonomy. Autonomy is the ability to be self-directed and self-controlled, to do what you choose when you choose. Autonomy is the application of learning to behaviour control. It is intrinsic. It is control from the inside. We begin with our model where we left off, with the two systems of adaption and control. In order for a person to have autonomy, we need to add learning to these two systems. To be able to do anything at all, an individual needs knowledge about things and knowledge of how to do things. To choose the right behaviours, we must make rational and informed judgments, even in the face of the biases which are an innate part of human nature. Knowledge also improves our ability to be creative, to use imagination and ingenuity, to come up with actions which nobody may have thought of before. All of this requires learning, and learning itself comes from a number of directions. We learn from experience, learning by trial and error. We also learn by imitation, and we learn by being taught. Learning gives us 3 additional reinforcing feedback loops, all of which help us to control our own behaviour and to be truly autonomous. Our final method of controlling behaviour is education. By intervening with learning in the right time, in the right way, we can give individuals the tools that they need to use autonomy to better control their own behaviour. We all know different things, and we all make different judgments. We're all more or less creative, and that's why we can all behave very differently, even in the same circumstances. In this episode, we've modelled the whole of a complex adaptive system, and what has emerged from that system is individual learned behaviour. There is so much more to behaviour than simply action. At the heart of our system lie 3 important human characteristics: agency, the ability to act with intention; adaption, the ability to modify our behaviour to suit the circumstances; and autonomy, the ability to choose our own purpose and to control our own behaviour. We've identified 4 ways to intervene and change behaviour. Each way affects a different part in the system, and it affects it in a different way. Each method has a different response from the individual and a different source of control. Every one of the methods works on its own. There is no best method, and sometimes we have to combine all the methods in order to effectively change behaviour. Individual behaviour is not the whole story. For millions of years, humans have depended on living in groups for their survival. So we need to understand group behaviour and how to change that. And that's what we'll be doing in the next episode. We've also introduced quite a number of new topics, and we will need to explore them in much more detail. We'll be doing that in future episodes, so if you want to join in, don't forget to subscribe.